Start the recording. So welcome. I'm here with Dan Bienenfeld, one of my teachers, and I was reading up some old articles, and he was writing about how he not only studied with Joseph Heller, which I knew about, but also some of the influences like Brew Joy, House Stone, Sidra Stone, Carolyn Conger, is that right?
Carolyn Conger, yes.
And Roger and Alexandria Pierce. And so I want to welcome Dan with all of his inspirations, with all of his knowledge, with all of his passion. He's been a teacher, a promoter, and a lover of Hellerwork, an author. And I feel like you've been teaching as soon as you could get your feet wet, and Joseph called you up to do it. So I'm so glad you could be here with us today. And maybe we could check in with each other and everyone out there in Hellerland and just do a little resonating.
Sounds great. I can feel the community.
Where do you feel that in your body?
Very good. Actually, I felt it in my hands and I felt it in my heart. I got the chills. I think those are the main places. Like a feeling of movement, of energy, a little sparkly feeling, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I could feel that in those areas as well. So I wanted to start off taking you back. So thinking back, I was reading the story of when Joseph Heller was working on your mother's psoas, and she was like, hey, why don't you, she said, Danny, why don't you trade Danny? And I was just wondering what was going through you at that time and how you knew that the answer was yes.
Oh, well, that's pretty easy. Great question. And that was an epic moment for sure, a moment I'll never forget, because I had gotten Rolfing, and when Joseph was president of the Rolf Institute, and just a little backstory, I had a girlfriend early on who was sort of a shorter, stocky type of a body type. And then I watched her over a period of months. She looked like a ballerina. And I didn't have any languaging around what that meant or even how that could be. I didn't understand how the body could change. And so I asked her, what are you doing? And she said, I'm doing Rolfing, structural integration. And I didn't know what that meant. I had no idea what it was, but in my little voice in my head said, yes, I need it. That's what I need, because I had severe scoliosis. And also, that's what I'm going to do. And so that was, that was really lucky of me. I was 18 years old and I had this, amazing experience doing Rolfing, going through the 10 sessions, actually screaming through the 10 sessions. It was so painful, with an amazing Rolfer who was one of the early Rolfers, someone named Hadija Lamas. And I was inspired and I became someone who no longer had pain in my body, and my body grew 1.5 inches just from the scoliosis unwinding. And I started feeling comfortable for the first time in many years, in my body, in my life, even in my psyche. And so I started I knew that was what I wanted to do, but I was too young. I was 18. And I called the Rolf Institute, knock, knock, knock on their door. And they said, sorry, you got to be 25. So I was really disappointed. And so I decided to continue going to school. In the meantime, my parents both started going, instead of seeing my Rolfer, I was really upset. They wanted to see some guy named Joseph Heller, which ended up being a good thing. But not only did did he later become my teacher, but also I got to watch my parents get sessions, and I just was like kind of like a puppy dog waiting at the door. I couldn't wait to start. And at the time, Joseph was president of the Rolf Institute, and he, I know that everyone who's listening to this knows the story, but he realized that, for this work to really last, as good as the manipulation and the structural body work is, you need to change your mind and also your movement patterns, because the patterns in which we behave, whether it's our psychology or our personality, the way we behave and also the way we move dictates how our body becomes. So without that training, within a year, my body started going back to twisted scoliosis, which was very disappointing, after having a complete elation. I mean, I thought if nothing else good in my life happens, I made it. I made it out of this deep hole in the ground or something. So I ended up going to see Joseph, and in a few sessions, he kind of showed me what I was doing that was putting my pattern back, and it was part of my emotional expression that did not allow myself to have anger. So he recognized it right away, and in a few sessions, I was back to my freedom. And I continued to watch my parents get worked on. And, one day he was working on my mother, and she, it was one of those embarrassing moments, because Joseph was the president of the Institute, and she knew I wanted to become a Rolfer, but I was too young. So she said, in the most embarrassing way, "Why don't you train Danny?" And I remember just like shrinking in my chair, like, don't, no. And then I'll never forget, because he took his hands out of her abdomen, which of course he was doing a 5th session, and he stepped back and he said, that's a good idea. So it was my mother that actually gave him the idea to start his own work, because, it was then being recognized that he was doing something different. He did something more holistic that considered not only the amazing work to release chronic pain and patterns in the body and realign the body with gravity, but also to teach us really how to be in the body and to be in our relationship between our emotional self and our body, so that the work could not only sustain, but evolve way past what any sessions could do. So it was very empowering. And so that was really the nature of that moment. So thank you, Mom. Yeah, she did an amazing thing that day. And so basically a few years later, he had, considered doing his own training, and he called me up and said, "Hey, I know you really want to do this. Are you ready to go?" And I said, "Yes." I jumped. And, at first we thought we were becoming Rolfers. We were doing the training just because it was, what an amazing teacher he was, what a brilliant, heart and soul and mind he had. So, it was only later that we found out that the Rolfe Institute did not approve of his, it was a non-sanctioned class. And
Oh,
because he wasn't one of the teachers, he wasn't on that tenure teacher track that they had. He just said, I'm doing it. And yeah, as he went into it, the Institute, even though he was the president, told him that, you're not going to be able to stay. And so he took the leap, and it was a great breakthrough for our field, because he did something that wasn't being done, and he opened the doors. It wasn't Ida Rolfe that didn't approve, by the way. Ida Rolfe was not in the politics of her organization. She was just she was the founder. It was the board at the time that didn't really want to do the emotional piece. She actually, well, Dr. Rolfe actually had told the practitioners, don't get involved in the client's process. Just let gravity be the therapist.
mhm,
But when people really found out why she said that, it was because a lot of the great therapists and psychologists of the day were the ones that were supporting her and getting Rolfing out there. Like even Dr. Fritz Perls brought Ida Rolfe to Esalen, and he recognized that this work was essential for evolving the psyche. So Dr. Rolfe was very sensitive about not wanting her practitioners to step on the toes of, the psychology movement, especially they weren't trained necessarily to do that. But it was also clear that at that time there was no somatic psychology. There was mental and emotional psychology, and this was actually a niche that got filled. And I think Joseph, as a pioneer in bringing that in, really opened the doors for many other schools of not only body work but of psychology to create this movement. It was actually an idea whose time has come.
mhm.
That you have to address the body, and hence you have many different types of trauma trainings and somatic therapies and in the somatic field that is now burgeoning. It's a huge field. So anyway, I hope I answered your question. I elaborated a little bit.
I'm so glad you did. I love hearing the story and your essence and how you see it as well. So
Mhm.
thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Let's see what else I've got here in my deep dive into your history that I could find. Um, so I kind of along those lines, I'm kind of curious to fill in some gaps. And there's a popular Voyage LA magazine article of you getting in there on a tiger's back. So part A was, what was that like? And I've got a part B.
Oh, was I in the picture of me working on the tiger?
Yeah.
Um, well, there was a moment in a rare, unpremeditated situation where I was in Thailand at a place called Tiger Kingdom, where you get to go in with the tigers and the lions, and apparently they're tame. It's probably an animal activist nightmare, because the tigers are, I think, more nocturnal, and so they let the guests in during the day, and they're kind of like dopey and woozy. I heard they're not on any drugs or anything, but so you go in and you cuddle them and you pet them, and so I thought, I wonder if I could work on this big cat. So I started palpating his spine, and I found a fixation over, on one of the hips,
Yeah.
and I thought, okay, I wonder if this will be okay. And so I started positioning myself to work, and I put in a little bit of pressure. And then the tiger kind of lifted his big head and looked at me, and I thought, maybe the camera clicked at that moment.
Uh-huh.
So that was almost the extent of it. I did get to work a little bit on the baby tigers and the baby lions,
Oh,
but it was just super fun. I mean, because you're in this field, it's like you get used to feeling bodies, and it doesn't really matter what body it is. It's like you kind of feel for areas open up and places that are stuck. So,
have you ever had a client give you that look?
oh yeah. Yeah, I have. Yeah. With people though, as you know, it can take many different forms. Someone could be silently tolerating something that they're not comfortable with because they're either afraid or too, macho to say, hey, that's too much. So, if someone has to lift their head and do that, that's a very blatant sign
Mhm,
that, maybe we've gone past a certain limit. I prefer, to feel, subtle contractions where you'll feel their body kind of from head to toe. You'll see the feet curl, or you'll feel something in their stomach tighten or their throat. That really shows that they're defending.
mhm,
So, in our work, we have a rule that if it's too much, that you can't breathe into it and open up and let go, then it's in a way counterproductive. To be working on tissue that's resisting, and then we just become part of their history of another insensitive infiltrator into their body.
mm,
Experiences where our boundaries have been violated. So I take the cues very seriously, and I also am there to coach them how to let in that moment, and then they were just afraid. But to the tiger, it wasn't that simple. I don't know tigers like I know people.
yeah. Sometimes, you don't have to worry about clients
Yeah,
necessarily biting your hand off or
right.
so the other part of the question is you spoke of that first experience rolfing as a mind body metamorphosis. So I'm
Mm.
curious if since then, if you've had any more instances where you felt a metamorphosis.
Uh-huh. Um, and you mean from any different type of influence?
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I have had many of those types of things related to things a client, like I work like such a somatic experience, or more accurately, um, PNE, which is psychoneuroenergetics, which is actually a type of work that I've been studying this last year, that has come in when I've had huge anxiety, and helping me track back into the body and get in touch with sensations and old memories that laid down some very primary patterns and imprints. Getting in touch with those and learning how to take them out of the body without inflaming, without re-traumatizing. So I've had a lot of those experiences through that type of work. I've had experiences of that type of huge evolution with workshops and courses that I've taken. Sometimes when people close to me, ask me what I'm up to, and I tell them about this amazing thing, they said, well, yeah, you get value out of all these things. They think of me as someone who's, well, that's what we always hear from you. This thing has evolved me and it's opened me up. And I think that it, for example, around the time when I did Rolfing, originally, I did something that used to be called the EST training,
Mhm.
Earhart Seminars training, and it later became Landmark. And um, that was a complete life-changing workshop that I took. I think the common thing is patterns that have dictated behaviors, whether they're in the body or whether they're in the psyche or in the emotional system. When those are brought to light and given an opportunity to clear, the experience that I have is that I can be present in present time. And I will say that without a doubt, the commitment of my life is to evolve. And I honestly feel like there's no other real reason for us to be here other than to love and to evolve. And I'm not trying to be cliche. I truly believe that. And so any opportunity we have, there's always an opportunity to have an evolution, even working through uncomfortable times, relationships, that I think our commitment to coming out and using the opportunity to learn and evolve, if we don't take it, we're really missing something. Otherwise our life is spent as a victim. This happened to me, that happened to me. So I think one of the blessings of our work is that we're literally taking people into in a way, it's like a minefield. By the time someone gets to maturity, something has happened to every square inch of the body. Either we've knocked it, we've judged it, we've hated it, someone said something about it. And, the gift of what we do with structural integration and Hellerwork in particular, because we're actually looking for clearing opportunities way beyond our dialogue process. But what is actually in there ready to come out? These things are they're dying to come out of us. They're dying to clear so we can be here. So because I subscribe to the idea that that's the purpose of our life, is to be present and to release anything that takes us away from that. I've had a lot of these types of metamorphosis. I love them. Believe me, I hope I have one today. Maybe I hope so, Greer.
Me
Wouldn't that be great?
too. I could feel it.
I can feel it. Yeah. Sometimes just opening up to the possibility of it is allows us to move forward with it.
How do you, when you encounter something that's challenging to you, you spoke of, what I heard was curiosity and love, but how do you open to challenges when they come up for you?
Okay. I'll say that I'm no different than anyone else. The first thing I do is I freak out. Things hit me like, what? That's not what I expected. That's not cool. That's not okay. And even though I'm telling you this, it's way less than it used to be. I feel like now that I don't necessarily expect everything to go the way that I expected it to go.
Mhm.
So that was a good move. So then that leaves us open to some sort of a journey or an adventure that's probably going to be way different than this thing that we absolutely, and don't get me wrong, there's things that I absolutely want to see happen the way I want to see them happen. Goals with business, goals with relationships, how material things, psychic things. But in answer to your original question, I originally get my nervous system goes on edge. I try to do what every good somatic therapist should do, which is notice how my body is behaving. So right now I was thinking of something and I just noticed my shoulders gripping and a little clench in my jaw and my stomach, and my toes were just like this, even talking to you. So I first go through the body, and then I just sort of feel I feel what's actually happening. There are certain things that lead to being okay with something that's happening. And one of the fundamental steps is accepting that this is happening. Acceptance, which has nothing to do with liking it or loving it. It might just be, hey, this person is doing this action. I have to just allow that to be, or wish that it wasn't this way. I have to see that that is what's happening. And then so I accept, I kind of let my body calm, I take some breaths. Sometimes I can do that in a split second, and sometimes it takes me a few days.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's taken me a few months. I also look at the belief system that I have about it, because something goes haywire and I have a belief that it's because I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, or maybe because so I have a belief that feeds into this. And so I look at what are the beliefs that I have. And then I go back to my body and check. So I believe that I'm not smart, because if I was really smart, this wouldn't have happened. I would have double, triple checked that thing. And then, of course, everything's based on something else. So, I have an old imprint because I was dyslexic that I'm stupid, because reading was hard and all that kind of stuff. So I go back to what is the belief that's at the base of this, and that I'm not smart, and so life isn't going to work out for me. And I challenge myself. I notice that it's a belief and I acknowledge it, and then I go back to the body. Where am I holding that in the body? And
Mm.
it's often a different place than where I first got the arousal. And so I go in and I explore the sensations. I look at what it looks like visually. I see if there's any, people, places, or events there. And so I actually process myself like I do with my clients. And that really helps. And then I get to more of a place of neutrality, like, hey, I didn't like this, and I'm actually accepting it, and I'm okay in my body, and my nervous system is now normally regulated, and I can move forward. And
Mhm.
what's the best action? Take responsibility for my part in all this, which I think is another important step. When people don't do that, they're really missing a growth opportunity, because we often, well, at some level, this is tricky, but at some level, I think we always have some influence on how things go. Even when horrible things happen, there could be a karmic choice that we made to be there at that time. It's not approving of what happened. It's not saying that it was okay, but I guess what I'm saying is that at some level, I may have signed up for this, and this is what I needed to go through, because otherwise I'll be a victim the rest of my life, and that's not any kind of way to live.
Mhm.
So anyway, in answer to your question, that's usually what I do. And I know that sounds like a lot of steps, but it's important steps. And I think that's also when we're working with clients with our work, that's how taking them all the way through like that is an opportunity that we have. And when we do, the likelihood of their body going back to these old patterns is less and less with every layer like this that we clear. And that's
Mhm.
why I'll just be honest, 10 sessions is not enough, or 11 sessions is not enough. And, by the way, Dr. Rolfe didn't think so either. It's just that she told people that, she only had a handful of people doing the work, and she didn't want them to spend their whole career working on the same people. So she made up these things. It's like, hey, after 10 sessions, you have to let them rest for a year and then move on to other people. as sometimes you do the series and now someone's ready for their work.
Mm-hmm.
They got a lot out of it. There's the next level of work. And so what I'm discovering is that there's really no end to the refinement that we can create. And it is possible to do too much. Have to be careful not to work on someone so much that their matrix gets soggy and
Mm-hmm.
shortened, you know. So there are things to look out for, but our work really goes on and on. It's like different cycles and levels of the work.
Yeah, was curious when you were talking because I've heard a few different people speak about this, but when you're in session with somebody, how do you know, oh, this is where we stop today?
Mm. Well, yeah. I think that I recognize that the work is never completely done. That helps. And to lower my expectation that today we have to completely, because our work is healing work, uh,
Mhm,
that we have to have finally, you know, gotten to the bottom and we've facilitated them into a complete and total healing. I don't buy into that. And I also know we have time, like, because most of us see multiple clients and we have someone coming in an hour and a half or whatever the time is that you work in. So, I use the clock too, like, hey, our time's up, because it's not that we're not done. I just try to leave them in an integrated place. So I sometimes I look at the clock when all hell breaks loose and someone's going through something. Um, I look at that, and I won't want to open up Pandora's box in the last 5 minutes of a session.
mhm,
I want to make sure we have time to to create some sort of a safety net and a functional net for the person so that they can, be okay with the doors we're opening, whether or not we go into resolution. And
mhm,
sometimes I find, oops, I wasn't able to get resolution and the session's over.
mhm,
And so we have to say, hey, let's just acknowledge that there's more to do here, and use your grounding tools when you leave here. Don't get back in your car. Allow this to continue to percolate. And in our next session, we're going to be working at this next level, and
mhm,
work with yourself in the meantime.
mhm,
Yeah. And, one of those things that I noticed is that, people can get really excited working with us over a period of years, not just like to do these 10 sessions. But if you actually can work with someone, um, which any good graduate should be able to do, is to find the next thing to work on and take it to the next level.
mhm,
So yeah, as far as opening up something, obviously we don't want to then close it up, but we want to open it up and integrate in some fashion. Rolf had a very good formula with this, which she tended to, at least with the body work, fit into her hour sessions. These three things: one is that you make space for things to change. Two is you make the change, you move the bones, or you know do the manipulations. And three is you integrate it. And you have to have all those three in some way in order for something to be complete. If you try to change something and there's not enough space in the body for it to change, it's not going to happen. Or if it did, it's not going to sustain.
mhm,
And if you don't allow the integration on the other end, and address the habits and have them, kind of feel the normalcy of something new, or even if it's awkward, to integrate it or challenge them to do so, they'll just go back to the old pattern. I think that's a good guideline even with processing work.
I was gonna say it sounded just like your process that you
Yeah,
described.
yeah,
You left space, you made changes and observations, and then you were like, okay, this is where we're going. This is where
right,
we're
right.
at.
And our methodologies, we're all different. Your way of working is going to be different than mine, which is great because we have our basic tools and then we have our own personal way of doing things. And I think that has to really be honored because we don't want to do something just like we learned it in order to be doing it right. We want to do the right thing for the client the way that we need to do it and find our way, because then our work is creative, and it's a pleasure to be creative when we're working and make things up. And that's one of the things I love about Joseph Heller, is that he didn't really care how you do it. He wanted to see it happen, you know,
Mhm,
working with the evolution of the person and the body so it could reach its full potential.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of along those lines, you talked a bit in your past articles about finding um I think it was like filling your soul, finding inspiration within but also without the work. And at the time it was music and playing your trumpet. So
Uh,
what's filling your soul right now?
uh-huh. Well, I think that, um, I could even say right now, this is filling my soul, engaging with you, interacting with you, talking about something I love, um, feeling your heart, the relational aspect of being together, even though we're virtual. Um, and also for myself in my own way, um, even though I'm not playing trumpet anymore, I still play music. So I sit down at the piano and play, and it doesn't matter because I'm not playing for anybody anymore. But I just love it, and when I don't play enough, I miss it, and I feel flatter. So,
Hmm.
there's other things. I get plenty of inspiration also from working. Even sometimes if I'm working too much, I'll get a little flat, and then I know I have to back off or go on a vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Having nature, and also, duh, um, just being in touch with my soul, which I think that, I'm really grateful that the last couple years, because I don't think I knew really how to do this before. I knew how to do it with external stimulation, like to go out into nature and to be, play the horn. Um, and then I felt so much more complete. And certainly those things are great to make the connection. And now I feel like I have much more of a direct connection. I can just ask spirit for connection because it's always there. It's always available. I just didn't used to know that. So sometimes it's simple as talking to spirit, and I don't think it matters what religion people are to do this. In fact, sometimes religion doesn't even have that kind of thing. It might be more like rote, um, things that you have to read and you might not connect, but going direct, yeah, I'm just going to use the term going direct to God is the best. Need a middleman, I don't need it. I can just feel it. And for me, because I'm very kinesthetic, it's something I feel in my body. I don't necessarily hear it, although sometimes I'll listen for the messages as far as connecting with spirit. And I'll tell you, for working, oh my gosh, that is such an asset. Listening to this small voice inside, and I can really differentiate it now. I'm working on differentiating it in all areas, which I'm still a student.
Mhm.
Like I have it down really well with work. Like when
Uh-huh.
I'm touching someone and I'm doing a session and I get the guidance, and it's I don't argue with it anymore. I don't, yeah, but they need that thing up at their head. That's what I'm supposed to do at this session. Instead I
Uh-huh.
go where I feel like it needs to be. And that really has proven to be the best approach. So
Hmm.
I think just that how I do it now is I just make the connection directly.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I could be hiking, I could be working, I could be in bed at night feeling kind of sad, and I want to connect with spirit and feel like I'm and actually know that I'm not alone. So this is new for me, Greer. I mean, I wish I could say I've been doing this my whole life, but it's really just the past few years. So whatever it is, I'm grateful.
How do you feel like it's shifting your life in the last couple of years?
Um, I think the biggest way is that it's telling me that I need to have this experience and that experience instead of my rational mind saying, no, don't go there. That's not the right thing. Don't go there. That's not the right thing. And even though it hasn't been an easy couple of years, I've let myself um, follow that. And I think because I spent a lot of my life, except for in a few key areas, not listening to that, um, I went overboard a little bit. And like sometimes I think we have to put it all together. There's a reason we say body, mind, and spirit.
Mhm.
It's not just the spirit and it's not just the mind. And I know a lot of people are mental bashers, like that the mind is a horrible thing. It's not. It's really important, and for our navigation, and so is our spirit. And that's the part that I think I'm discovering. So I feel like I'm having a lot more fun,
Mhm.
having a lot more adventures. I'm taking many more chances. And this is the part where I have to keep my mind active and not just go with, hey, that looks great. And it's not, I'm also not confusing spirit with the part that just wants, like, I want that, I want that. That's not what it's about for me. It's actually realizing that I need to have certain experiences.
Mhm.
So instead of judging myself so much, like I'm bad because I did this or that, I needed to have that experience. It's so clear. So that's all I have to say about that.
Well, what I heard is a lot throughout the talk about different forms of uh, control and surrender. And
Mm.
one of the articles I found I really like was your experience when you were in Japan.
Uh,
And you talked about a woman who said that she was like 90% in control, but she was aiming for 100 so that she could surrender. And
exactly.
so I guess I'm just curious what your relationship is with control and surrender today.
Oh,
And maybe if
wow.
you want to share about that experience, because that sounds like a pretty wonderful
Yeah,
experience.
well, I'll just briefly just sort of recant the story that we did a couple trainings in Tokyo. Actually it was I don't remember if we did one or two, but it was Joseph and I and Donna Bialis. And it was so much fun. It was the Japanese students were there was a translator, and um, they were so generous and warm and eager to learn. And because of the Japanese culture, they were so respectful, a type of respect you don't really get in the United States. Like every day the students would come to get to the classroom, and it would take them, an hour by train or 2 hours each way, and they'd leave every night. Like that alone, you'd never see someone here do. Oh, that's too much work. But then they would come early and vacuum and clean and prepare meals, and it's like, wow, that was impressive. But anyway, back to the point. One of the model for the class in demonstrating the series was one of the high authorities in Tokyo, psychotherapists. She was like I think in charge of a whole division of psychotherapy in Tokyo in some clinical setting. And so, we did great work, and we got to control and surrender session 4. And so, as I often do, I asked her, what was her relationship with control, and how is it for her to surrender, to let go. And I know that in that culture that control is a very important thing. And to me, up till that point, it wouldn't matter how much I was trying to control something. The goal would be to let go of the control and just surrender. And when I asked her about her relationship with that, she said, well, I'm about 90% in control, but I'm striving for 100%. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do with this? It was like a completely different philosophy.
Mhm.
And I was looking at the students, and they didn't kind of budge. They were right along with her. And then the next thing she said was profound. She said, yeah, because when I'm 100% in control, I can completely surrender. And it really gave me a whole different idea about the relationship between control and surrender, that there's a lot of control and surrender.
Mhm.
Letting go doesn't happen without a certain kind of control. First of all, we have to control our inhibitions to surrender. We have to control don't do that. There's a lot that we go through. So anyway, that was a fascinating experience in Japan. And I don't think our students, uh, I think what we heard a few years later from that class is that Hellerwork was not an idea whose time has come yet in Japan, that it was asking a lot, not because of the manipulation and the body work, but I think because of the dialogue. Even asking someone, this was my understanding, even asking someone in Japan, how are you? How are you doing? Something that we would do easily here is considered impolite. So I think, allowing the privacy around the psychology there, this was a very avant-garde thing to be having them share what they're feeling. And yet I'm here to tell you that they did it. And even with a life and a whole genealogy of that's a no-no, we watched them do it in the class, that they freed themselves. And I think from there it was just hard for them to ask that of their culture at the time. I think things have changed though. Maybe it's time to go back there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm all for Hellerwork expansion project.
Why not?
Um, so one thing I found really curious and I was really wanting to get your take on, and I wonder if I could read something you wrote back
Sure.
in 2002. So you
Sure.
were talking about training, and you said the training environment in the early years was filled with excitement and wonder. The classes were frequently altered from their original intent to respond to group energy and the whim of the teacher. This was the environment Dr. Rolfe would apparently call creative chaos. And then he later said, modern students don't seem to appreciate and don't seem to appreciate and demand more structure and organization than ever before. So I'm wondering, since you're still teaching, where do you feel that the training and the teacher are evolving, or where would you like it to go? And where do you think the present day students are wanting from the training?
Mm. Wow, Greer, that's a really good question, and I wonder how well we have the pulse and understanding of that. Originally, when you talked about these wild years of the past when Hellerwork was in its infancy, it was a time, it was like, in the late 70s, and there was a, we were having a social revolution. There was a sexual revolution, there was, women's rights. There was, in a way, a whole unruly, anti-conventional type of environment. And so I think that reflected in the classroom. And, once that time period came to an end, things became a lot more conservative. I think in the last, certainly in the last 20 years, definitely. But it slowly kind of became this way. Like, it wasn't unnatural in these early trainings we did, like people were walking around naked, for example. And of course, we deal with bodies, so it's not like, oh my God, they're naked. We work on people that are in their underwear or naked. So but it's just that the climate of the time changed, and so did it. The consciousness around safety in the classroom, I think, was part of it. We used to do a lot of high confronting students, about their, just like in the tough love, like, you're full of shit, you have a bullshit belief. And, that wouldn't be a thing you could do these days. You have to kind of honor, I mean, that it's a different, something happened in psychology too. There was like a real tough love environment in the 60s and 70s. In the 80s, it started to shift. And I think there was more consciousness around trauma. There was more consciousness around, well, certainly safety and security. And so being gentler, and instead of telling someone what they're going to do, I'm going to now invite you to, even the words that we would use. And I think because of this era that we're in, as far as people really wanting to own their rights, people don't want autocratic leaders. People don't want someone telling them what to do. They want to be invited, and they want to have a choice. And this is kind of epitomized if you think about the climate in the workplace with millennials. People that work with millennials, no offense to anyone that's listening to this, it's just true. Like I work with a lot of bosses, and they ask their millennial assistant to make a spreadsheet and to do these 5 things, and the client will, or the assistant will say, I'm not into that. In the olden days, your boss says you do something and you do it. Anyway, this is a long roundabout way to say what's changed in the classroom. Instead of having chaos, we found that a lot of people didn't feel safe. They want to know what's going to happen, and they want to know when it's going to end. They want to know what's expected. And so there was less flexibility, like making up what's needed on the spot. And then instead, when I look at how our training has changed, I spent with the faculty, I don't know, 7 years or so making a training manual. And I was the stick in the mud. I didn't want to do it. And I was the guy saying, no, that's no fun. It's like, if it's 3 o'clock and you're supposed to do this class, I don't want to be stuck having to do that class. I want to do the class that's needed. And so that's different now. We've had to, or we've made changes to really stick to a consistent curriculum. We also had to do that because if someone was teaching another training in another part of the world, we didn't get the same product. Like if the training in Australia or Canada was spending more time with psychology and they didn't do as much body work, or I'm just using that as an example. Then if someone wanted Hellerwork, they wouldn't get they didn't learn the same things. So we made a decision to centralize and to, make a continuity with our education. And, I'm happy to say it's a great program. It's just different than how it used to be. And some of the trainers, to be honest, don't like doing it this way. And they're not wanting to do it anymore. They wanted more freedom around, the creation of the moment. So I feel like I kind of took it on creatively, like, okay, I'm going to be creative within the structure. That's kind of how I hold a lot of things. I even hold Hellerwork that way. I'm still doing the series. That's a structure. I'm still have the same goals. And the way that I get to go through the session is more creative, because I don't want to do something by rote. I don't want to do, for me, that's not who I am. It's not how I function. And it's not as good for the client. We have to be creative, and we have to do that for the students too.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you recently did the Polish Fascia Symposium, and I want to hear about that. And because when I was reading and hearing you talking, you've been to so many different cultures. I know the symposium was remote, but I think you've been to Poland before.
Yes.
So I want to know about the symposium and what from the Polish experience, what kind of body modeling or things did you learn in Poland?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, the Odyssey started about 4 years ago, because this international organization, it's really a bodywork school located near Warsaw, Poland, where they have not only people from Poland, but a lot of Europeans come to study with them and take their classes. They reached out to Joseph Heller to come over and teach a course. And he was retired. So he said, he recommended me, which I was grateful for. And I got very excited. First of all, part of the reason I think they invited him was because he came from Poland.
Yeah.
His family really escaped Poland when he was a baby, and smuggled him to Paris, and where he grew up for his early years. So I don't even think they knew that. They just knew that he was from Poland. Uh, they didn't realize that he escaped with his life, you know. But anyway, my family, ironically enough, also came from there. So for me, it was extra special. And I went over there and I did a intro to Hellerwork course, a 4-day course. And it was really fun, you know, with interpreter. And um, I had one of our practitioners from England, Roger Galton, came and worked with me with the students, and we had a great time. It was, you know, they absorbed the work. A lot of them were physical therapists or massage therapists primarily. And you know, by the time we finished, they said we want to do a whole training here, and so we started organizing around that. And then shortly after COVID hit,
Hmm.
everything locked down. So I've been in dialogue with them about going back over and organizing a training. This would be a slightly shorter one because they already have license to touch. You know, they're already, so that it's not about getting a massage license or anything like that. But I've been, you know, working and coordinating with them. Hopefully in 2023, we'll start a program there. I'm hoping. As far as the people, um, it's hard to, you know, because they didn't speak English other than a few words, and I didn't speak Polish. I had my calculator there that was translating, and I couldn't even understand the calculator. You know, there was this very difficult language, which I am committed to learn some things. Like when Joseph Heller and I went to Japan, he took it on himself to learn all the muscles in Japanese,
Wow.
and he did it. You know, they were like, he taught them anatomy in Japanese. Uh, but he's a rocket scientist, and, and I don't have that kind of a brain. No discount on myself. It's just that it didn't, you know, by the time I left there, I knew like 3 words. And he knew, you know, he knew how to navigate the subway system and completely, as Joseph does, he's just so brilliant like that. So anyway, the consciousness level, if we want to start there in Poland, was um, it felt like it was very high, and it also felt like they were an oppressed people. Uh, it felt like they had been oppressed. Yeah, they were occupied by the Nazis. They were in war-torn, you know, Eastern Bloc, didn't have freedoms. And you can kind of see it in their body. You can feel it in their armor, you can feel it in the room. And of course, you know, things are opening up there, seemingly. Um, although there's a new leader, or there's a leader there now who's more kind of pulling things back in a little bit. But there is an expansion. I definitely got a feeling that the women's movement was, it sounds archaic to call it the women's movement. But if you go back, uh, you know, 50 years in the US, you know, where women were fighting for equality, and look what's happened. A lot has happened in 50 years. It's not there yet. But if you go to Poland and some of these Eastern countries, it's still pretty backwards like that, you know, very patriarchal. But the consciousness, the beauty, the hearts are there. They're beautiful. I had such a great time, and I'm looking forward to going back. Yeah.
Lovely. Did
Mm.
you learn uh any sparks from the fascia symposium?
Oh yeah, and so thank you. That was the original question. So first I went out over there and did the presentation, and then for the last 3 years I've been presenting at the symposium. And you know, these are virtual, so everything's online. So I would pre-record a presentation, and then they would you know, play it, and then I would be available for answering questions. And It was really fun. The first year I did somatic psychology,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of gave them an idea of the kinds of things we do when we're working with people, from exploring into the body with imagery to asking them questions. What are you experiencing here? Where do you feel that sensation? Can you elaborate on what the sensations feel like? And even helping them, move towards resolution with certain things that would come up during sessions. So that was the first one. The second one was movement education. And this third one was I gave a Hellerwork demonstration. So I did, I explained everything, and I think I have part of that on my website. It's just like a demo. And yeah, there were a lot of questions. The questions were all in Polish, so I only could answer the one in English. But anyway, yeah, the moderator was really nice, and yeah, they're hungry over there. They have a lot of techniques, and I think the Eastern European mentality is very much oriented towards fix it, and they have brilliant fixers and all kinds of tools you use to fix the tissue. And the work that we do, that's whole body oriented. I wanted to share with them that it's a different way of looking at the body, and especially because this is the fascia symposium, to address the nature of this pervasive net that surrounds everything and goes through everything. And I think they really appreciated it, and yeah, it made them more hungry for a program there.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I am feeling a little bit in the air that we're coming to a close, even
Okay.
though I have more questions. I still want to hear more about the history, more about you, but I feel like there's time and space for that. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your heart, your time, your presence.
It's my honor, and it's a privilege, and also it's beautiful to connect with you, Greer, and I look forward to doing more.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.